On the night of March 14, 2010, the Riverview Grand Casino in St. Louis, Missouri became the site of one of the most audacious inside jobs in American casino history. Over $6.5 million in cash and gold-backed gaming chips vanished from a supposedly impenetrable vault system in less than 12 minutes. The heist was flawless in execution, invisible in its approach, and devastatingly simple in its design. Security cameras captured almost nothing. Alarms never sounded. The armored transport scheduled to arrive at sunrise found empty steel shelves where fortunes had sat just hours before. For nearly 3 years, the case remained open but cold. The FBI's Violent Crimes Division worked alongside Missouri State Police and the casino's private security consultants, chasing leads that dissolved into dead ends. Theories multiplied. A professional crew from Chicago, Eastern European specialists, former military contractors. The investigation produced thousands of pages of reports, hundreds of interviews, and 0 arrests. The truth was far more elegant than anyone initially suspected. The man responsible had been hiding in the most obvious place imaginable. Not in another state or country, but in the same building where the crime occurred. Not under an alias or in witness protection, but under his own name, doing the same job he'd held for nearly a decade. His name was Darius Caldwell, a 43-year-old custodial supervisor who had worked the graveyard shift at Riverview Grand since 2001. He didn't run. He didn't disappear. He simply continued mopping floors, emptying trash bins and nodding politely to security guards who never once suspected the quiet, dependable janitor had orchestrated the entire operation. The crime would eventually unravel, not through brilliant detective work, but through something far more mundane. A bitter divorce, a vindictive ex-wife, and a storage unit filled with meticulously kept records that Darius never imagined anyone would find. Before we dive deeper into this incredible story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The Riverview Grand Casino sat on the western bank of the Mississippi River, a sprawling complex of slot machines, table games, restaurants, and hotel towers that employed over 800 people across 3 shifts. It had opened in 1998 during the riverboat gambling boom, though by 2010 the building had expanded far beyond its original floating platform into a permanent land-based facility. The casino floor alone covered 42,000 square feet. Beneath it ran a labyrinth of service corridors, mechanical rooms, storage vaults, and employee passages that few patrons ever saw. Darius Caldwell had seen all of it. Born in East St. Louis in 1967, Darius grew up in a working-class neighborhood where steady employment mattered more than ambition. His father worked construction. His mother cleaned houses. Darius followed a similar path, taking custodial jobs after high school, moving from office buildings to hospitals to retail spaces. He was reliable, punctual, invisible in the way service workers often are to the people they serve. In 2001, at age 34, he applied for a night shift position at Riverview Grand. The casino was expanding its housekeeping department, and Darius's resume showed exactly the kind of stable employment history they valued. He passed the background check without issue. No criminal record, no red flags. He started at $11 an hour, working midnight to 8 in the morning. Responsible for cleaning public restrooms, emptying slot machine ashtrays, and maintaining the employee break rooms in the basement levels. The work was unglamorous but steady. Darius rarely missed shifts. He didn't complain. He learned the routes, memorized the schedules, and became part of the building's invisible infrastructure. By 2005, he'd been promoted to custodial supervisor, managing a team of 6 other overnight cleaners. The raise brought him to $16 an hour. It still wasn't enough. Darius had married young, and by the mid-2000s, his marriage to Shanice was fraying under financial pressure. 2 daughters in middle school, medical bills from his wife's ongoing treatment for lupus, a mortgage on a modest ranch house in Florissant that had seemed manageable in better years but now consumed most of his paycheck. Credit card debt climbed steadily. Payday loans filled the gaps. By 2007, Darius was drowning in obligations that his custodial salary could never resolve. He wasn't a gambler. He didn't drink away his paycheck or chase risky investments. He was simply a man caught in the grinding arithmetic of working-class America, where one medical emergency or car repair could unravel years of careful budgeting. That was when he began to truly see the casino for what it was. Not as an employer, not as a workplace, but as a system with vulnerabilities. Darius's night shift access gave him something most casino employees never had: unsupervised time in restricted areas. His keycard, upgraded when he became supervisor, allowed entry into maintenance corridors, loading docks, and the outer perimeter of the vault storage zones. He wasn't authorized for the vault itself, but he could move freely in the surrounding infrastructure. Over months, then years, he began to notice patterns. Security guards rotated in predictable cycles. At 2:15 every morning, the guard stationed near the lower vault corridor walked to the employee break room for coffee. The walk took 4 minutes. During that window, the hallway sat empty except for cameras. But Darius knew those cameras. He'd cleaned around them for years. He knew which ones had fixed angles and which ones panned slowly on mechanical gimbals. He knew that camera 7 on the B-level corridor had a slight drift in its pan cycle, creating a 7-second gap where the vault hallway door remained out of frame. 7 seconds wasn't enough to breach a vault, but it was enough to open a service door without being recorded. Darius also noticed how the vault codes operated. Riverview Grand used a dual authentication system requiring both a keycard swipe and a 6-digit code changed monthly. The codes were distributed to senior security staff and vault managers. But Darius had learned something crucial through simple observation. Supervisors often wrote backup codes on paper slips kept in desk drawers or filed in maintenance logs, violating protocol but ensuring they wouldn't be locked out during emergencies. He found his first code in late 2008, written on a sticky note tucked inside a supervisor's desk drawer while cleaning the security office. He didn't take it. He simply memorized the 6 digits and waited to see if they changed the following month. They didn't. That was when Darius realized the scope of what might be possible. He spent the next 18 months mapping the casino's entire security infrastructure, not through hacking or stealing documents, but through patient observation. He learned which fire doors triggered silent alarms and which were only monitored during business hours. He discovered that the CCTV monitoring room had blind spots during shift changes when outgoing guards logged off and incoming staff logged in, creating 5-minute windows of reduced surveillance. He studied the armored transport schedules. Money moved in and out of Riverview Grand on fixed days, always early morning, always with the same company. After major holiday weekends, the vault held significantly more cash than usual, staged in preparation for pickup at dawn. Darius began planning not for a smash-and-grab robbery, but for something far more sophisticated, a heist that would look like someone else's crime. He needed help. One man couldn't move $6 million in 12 minutes. He needed a team small enough to control, skilled enough to execute precisely, and trustworthy enough not to panic. In early 2009, Darius reconnected with his younger cousin, Jerome Caldwell, who had recently been released after serving 4 years for armed robbery in Illinois. Jerome was 31. More importantly, Jerome understood how to handle himself in high-risk situations without drawing attention. Through Jerome, Darius was introduced to two other men: Trent Bishop, a former security systems installer who had left the industry after a DUI conviction cost him his license, and Kendrick Hayes, who had worked loading docks and freight transport and knew how to move large quantities of material quickly and quietly. None of them were career criminals. None had connections to organized crime. They were men who had slipped through the cracks of legitimate employment and found themselves willing to consider alternatives. Darius pitched the job carefully. He emphasized patience, precision, no violence, no masks, no Hollywood theatrics. The operation would rely entirely on timing, access, and insider knowledge. If done correctly, they would be invisible. The casino would realize money was missing, but the evidence would point nowhere conclusive. The plan took months to finalize. Darius would provide access and disable the alarm systems from inside the security network. Jerome and Trent would handle the physical extraction of cash and chips from the vault, moving material through service corridors to a loading dock that connected to the employee parking structure. Kendrick would position a commercial laundry van near the dock, disguised as a routine service vehicle making an overnight delivery. The entire operation needed to occur during a narrow 12-minute window when guard rotations, camera cycles, and shift changes created maximum vulnerability. They rehearsed the timing without ever entering the building together. Darius walked the routes repeatedly during his shifts, timing each segment down to the second. Jerome and Trent studied the floor plans Darius had memorized and sketched from memory. Kendrick acquired the van through a shell rental company, ensuring it had no connection to any of their real identities. The target date was set for mid-March 2010, following the St. Patrick's Day weekend when casino revenues spiked and vault storage reached maximum capacity before Monday morning transport. Everything hinged on Darius remaining invisible, not just during the heist, but after. The night of March 14, 2010 began like any other. Darius clocked in at midnight, swiping his keycard through the employee entrance on the lower level. He wore his standard uniform, dark blue work pants, a gray custodial polo with the Riverview Grand logo, steel-toed boots. He carried his usual equipment, a rolling cart loaded with cleaning supplies, trash bags, disinfectant spray, a mop and bucket. Everything appeared routine. For the first 90 minutes, Darius followed his normal route. He emptied trash bins on the casino floor. He cleaned restrooms near the high-limit slots. He mopped the employee break room. Security cameras captured him working steadily, methodically, exactly as he had for nearly a decade. At 1:47 in the morning, Darius descended to the B-level maintenance corridor. This was expected. His route always included the basement levels where employee facilities and mechanical systems required regular attention. At 1:53, he used his keycard to enter a restricted service hallway that ran parallel to the vault storage zone. His access was legitimate. He was authorized to clean these areas. At 1:58, Darius positioned his cleaning cart at a specific angle in the hallway, blocking the lower half of Camera 7's field of view. To anyone watching the monitors, it looked like a cart left momentarily, while the custodian worked nearby. At 2:01, the guard stationed near the vault corridor left for his scheduled coffee break. At 2:03, Darius moved. He didn't run. He walked purposefully to a service door marked Mechanical Access Only and swiped his keycard. The door unlocked with a soft click. Beyond it lay a narrow utility corridor that maintenance staff used to access HVAC systems and electrical panels. Most employees didn't know this corridor existed. Darius had cleaned it for years. At 2:05, Jerome and Trent entered through a loading dock entrance on the opposite side of the building. Kendrick had dropped them near the employee parking structure 20 minutes earlier. They wore dark coveralls and carried empty duffel bags. To anyone glancing at a monitor, they looked like overnight maintenance contractors. At 2:07, all three men met in the utility corridor beneath the vault level. Darius had already accessed the security system's control terminal, a metal panel mounted in the corridor's wall that allowed maintenance staff to reset breakers and troubleshoot power issues. But this terminal also connected to the casino's networked alarm system. Using a 6-digit override code he'd memorized months earlier, Darius disabled the vault's motion sensors and door alarms. The system logged the action as routine maintenance. No alerts triggered. At 2:09, Darius led Jerome and Trent up a narrow metal staircase to the vault corridor itself. The vault door was massive, stainless steel, designed to resist cutting torches and explosives. But it wasn't designed to resist someone with legitimate access codes. Darius swiped his upgraded keycard and entered the 6-digit code. The lock disengaged with a heavy metallic thunk. At 2:11, the vault opened. Inside, the space was smaller than most people imagine casino vaults to be. Approximately 12 feet by 15 feet, lined with steel shelving units holding cash in banded stacks, and metal cases containing high-value chips. The casino had staged over $6.5 million in preparation for Monday morning's armored transport. Stacks of hundreds, 50s, 20s. Gold-trimmed chips worth $10,000 each. Jerome and Trent worked without speaking. They had memorized the plan. Take only bundled cash and the highest value chips. Leave everything else untouched. Move fast but deliberately. No mistakes. They filled 6 duffel bags in 9 minutes. At 2:20, the vault door closed. Darius reset the alarm system, restoring full function. The security network showed no record of tampering, only the brief maintenance override that Darius's access level authorized him to perform. At 2:23, Jerome and Trent descended the metal staircase and retraced their path through the utility corridor toward the loading dock. At 2:26, they reached the loading dock. Kendrick's van sat parked against the delivery bay, engine running, rear doors open. Jerome and Trent loaded the duffel bags into the cargo area and climbed inside. At 2:29, the van pulled away from the loading dock and exited the employee parking structure. At 2:31, Darius returned to the service hallway where he'd left his cleaning cart. And then he executed the final, most critical phase of the plan. At 2:33, Darius entered a narrow storage closet off the service corridor. He positioned himself inside, back against the wall, and used a length of nylon cord to bind his own wrists loosely in front of him. He had practiced this motion dozens of times at home. The binding needed to look restrictive, but couldn't actually prevent him from freeing himself if something went wrong. He left the closet door slightly ajar. At 2:41, a security guard making rounds discovered the abandoned cleaning cart in the hallway. Standard protocol required checking for the employee. The guard called Darius's name, no response. The guard walked further down the corridor and noticed the storage closet door hanging open. Inside, he found Darius sitting against the wall, wrists bound, expression shaken. The guard immediately radioed for backup. Within minutes, security swarmed the lower level. Darius told them a consistent story. 2 masked men had grabbed him near the service corridor, forced him at gunpoint to guide them through restricted areas, then locked him in the closet before fleeing. He claimed he never saw their faces. He didn't know what they were after. He just did what they told him to survive. At 3:05 in the morning, casino management conducted a routine check of the vault in response to the security incident. That was when they discovered the missing money. Panic spread through the building's administrative levels. The FBI was contacted immediately. Local police established a perimeter. Security footage was reviewed frame by frame, but the footage showed almost nothing useful. Darius's movements appeared normal until the moment his cart was found abandoned. The utility corridor cameras had been positioned to monitor entry points, not the interior passages. The vault itself had no internal cameras due to Gaming Commission privacy regulations. The investigation focused initially on Darius as a potential hostage and witness. Detectives interviewed him for hours. His story remained consistent. Yes, he'd been forced to help. No, he hadn't seen faces. Yes, he was terrified. He showed no obvious signs of deception, but investigators began noticing inconsistencies. The nylon cord binding his wrists left no bruising or ligature marks consistent with violent restraint. Medical examiners found no injuries suggesting a physical struggle. The positioning of the cleaning cart seemed too precise, blocking specific camera angles in a way that suggested knowledge of surveillance blind spots. Most damaging was the timeline itself. Darius's keycard had logged access to restricted areas at times that didn't align with his story of being held hostage. If masked men had forced him through the corridors, why did his badge show solo access entries? By March 16th, just 2 days after the heist, the FBI's working theory shifted. Darius wasn't a victim. He was a participant, possibly the architect. Agents obtained warrants and searched his home in Florissant. They expected to find evidence: hidden cash, stolen chips, weapons, accomplices' contact information. They found none of it. The house was modest, sparsely furnished, ordinary in every way. No unexplained wealth, no luxury purchases, no signs of sudden financial improvement. Darius's bank account showed the same struggling paycheck-to-paycheck pattern they'd shown for years. But there were subtle anomalies. A credit card debt of $14,000 had been paid off in full 3 weeks before the heist. The payment came through a wire transfer from an account belonging to Darius's cousin, Jerome Caldwell, who claimed it was a family loan to help with medical bills. Investigators found this suspicious but couldn't prove it was connected to criminal planning. A used Toyota Camry, purchased 2 months earlier, had been paid for in cash through a private sale. Darius claimed he'd saved money over several months. The seller confirmed the cash transaction but remembered nothing unusual about the buyer. Small deposits into his checking account, always under $3,000, appeared sporadically in the months before the heist. Darius explained these as repayments from relatives he'd helped financially over the years. The amounts were small enough to avoid triggering federal reporting requirements. The FBI suspected Darius had been paid in advance for his role, with the money carefully laundered through family members to avoid detection. But suspicion wasn't evidence. Without the stolen cash, without witnesses, without communication records linking him to accomplices, prosecutors had no case. Darius was never arrested. On March 9, 2010, 8 days after the heist, Riverview Grand Casino terminated his employment. The official reason cited violation of security protocols during the incident. Unofficially, everyone understood why. The FBI investigation continued for months. Agents interviewed over 200 casino employees, reviewed thousands of hours of surveillance footage, tracked financial records for Darius and anyone connected to him. They identified Jerome Caldwell as a person of interest due to his criminal history and the suspicious loan, but Jerome's alibi for the night of the heist was solid. He'd been at his girlfriend's apartment in Illinois, confirmed by her testimony and cell tower data. Trent Bishop and Kendrick Hayes were never identified. They had no direct connection to Darius in any database. They had left no physical evidence in the casino. The van used in the operation had been rented through a shell company that dissolved weeks after the heist, its registration records leading nowhere. By autumn 2010, the case went cold. The money was gone. The perpetrators were invisible. And Darius Caldwell was living quietly in St. Louis, unemployed but not desperate, his debts mysteriously manageable despite having no obvious income. For the next 3 years, Darius maintained an almost monastic discipline. He didn't buy a new car. He didn't move to a larger house. He didn't take vacations or make flashy purchases. He found part-time work doing residential cleaning through a small local company, earning just enough to appear legitimately employed. The $6.5 million had been divided according to the plan. Darius kept $2 million. Jerome, Trent, and Kendrick each took $1.5 million. The operations expenses and laundering costs consumed the remainder, but none of them could spend it freely. The cash had been converted immediately after the heist through a network of intermediaries Kendrick had connections with from his freight transport days. Small amounts were funneled into prepaid debit cards, used for everyday purchases that left no paper trail. Larger sums were converted into cashier's checks purchased at multiple banks across different states, then deposited into accounts opened under shell LLCs. Some money went into gold and silver bullion, stored in private safe deposit boxes far from Missouri. Darius's share sat largely untouched for years. He allowed himself small improvements, paying off his mortgage ahead of schedule using fabricated consulting income, buying groceries with prepaid cards, covering his daughter's school expenses without taking new loans. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would trigger suspicion. He avoided contact with Jerome, Trent, and Kendrick. The plan had always been to separate completely after the heist, to become strangers again, to never communicate in any traceable way. But living with the secret took a psychological toll. Darius had always been a quiet man, but in the years after the heist, he became withdrawn. His marriage to Shanice, already strained before the crime, deteriorated further. She noticed changes in his behavior, long silences, reluctance to discuss finances. Despite their suddenly improved situation, a constant low-level anxiety that he couldn't explain. In early 2012, Shanice filed for divorce. The proceedings were bitter. Shanice suspected infidelity. She hired a lawyer who demanded full financial disclosure, questioning how Darius had managed to pay off their mortgage despite working only part-time cleaning jobs. Darius claimed he'd received an inheritance from a distant relative, a lie that couldn't be easily disproven but felt flimsy under scrutiny. The divorce finalized in October 2012. Shanice was awarded the house. Darius moved into a small apartment in South St. Louis, taking almost nothing with him. What he didn't take was a storage unit. During the marriage, Darius had rented a climate-controlled storage space in Shanice's name, claiming he needed it for old work equipment and seasonal items. Inside that unit, hidden beneath boxes of holiday decorations and forgotten furniture, Darius had kept meticulous records. He documented everything. Floor plans of the casino sketched from memory, timing charts showing guard rotations and camera cycles, handwritten notes detailing security vulnerabilities, even a ledger tracking how the stolen money had been divided and laundered. Darius had kept these records as insurance, a way to ensure his collaborators honored the agreement and didn't betray him. He'd meant to destroy them eventually, but the divorce happened faster than he anticipated, and in the chaos of separating households, he simply forgot about the storage unit. Shanice forgot about it too. For nearly a year, she paid the monthly rental fee automatically through her bank account, not realizing what the unit contained. In November 2013, Shanice decided to clean out the storage space to save money. She brought her new boyfriend in a truck, planning to sort through the boxes and donate whatever was salvageable. Near the back of the unit, beneath a stack of old moving blankets, she found a plastic filing crate. Inside were Darius's records. At first, she didn't understand what she was looking at. Sketches of hallways and doors, lists of numbers, dates, names she didn't recognize. But as she read further, the context became horrifyingly clear. Shanice called her divorce attorney. The attorney immediately contacted federal authorities. On November 18, 2013, FBI agents executed search warrants at Darius's apartment, Jerome Caldwell's residence in Illinois, and the homes of Trent Bishop and Kendrick Hayes, whose identities were revealed in Darius's notes. Agents found additional evidence: prepaid cards with transaction histories linking back to the weeks after the heist, cashier's checks deposited into shell accounts, safe deposit box keys, email exchanges between the conspirators discussing the project in coded language that prosecutors would later argue referred to the heist. Darius was arrested at his apartment without resistance. He said nothing during processing. Jerome, Trent, and Kendrick were arrested the same day. The trial took place in federal court in St. Louis throughout the summer of 2014. Prosecutors presented the storage unit documents as the cornerstone of their case, supported by financial records, witness testimony, and forensic analysis of the casino's security systems. Darius's defense argued that the documents were speculative notes from a disgruntled employee fantasizing about theft, not evidence of an actual crime. But the financial evidence contradicted that claim: the payments, the shell companies, the unexplained income. In September 2014, all 4 men were convicted on charges including conspiracy to commit theft, money laundering, and fraud. Darius received a 22-year federal prison sentence. Jerome, Trent, and Kendrick each received 18 years. Of the $6.5 million stolen in 2010, federal agents recovered approximately $1.3 million through asset forfeiture, seizing bank accounts, safe deposit boxes, and property purchased with laundered funds. The remaining $5.2 million was never recovered, likely dissipated through spending and hidden in accounts authorities couldn't trace. Riverview Grand Casino upgraded its security systems extensively after the heist. Vault codes were changed to biometric authentication. Camera coverage was expanded to eliminate blind spots. Maintenance access to critical systems was restricted and monitored in real time. The case became a cautionary tale in casino security conferences, illustrating how insider threats often pose greater risks than external criminals. Trust, routine, and institutional familiarity can create vulnerabilities that no amount of technology can fully eliminate. Darius Caldwell remains incarcerated in a federal facility in Terre Haute, Indiana. His earliest possible release date is 2032. He rarely grants interviews. When he does speak, he expresses regret not for the crime itself, but for keeping the records that led to his conviction. The invisibility that had protected him for 3 years was shattered not by brilliant detective work, but by something far more ordinary: a forgotten storage unit, a vindictive ex-wife, and the simple human failure to destroy evidence when he had the chance. The aftermath of the conviction sent ripples through more than just the 4 men directly involved. Families were shattered. Darius's 2 daughters, both teenagers when their father was arrested, struggled to reconcile the quiet, hard-working man they'd known with the criminal the federal prosecutors described in court. The older daughter, Jasmine, testified reluctantly during the sentencing phase, describing how her father had always emphasized honesty and hard work, making his betrayal of those values feel even more devastating. Shanice testified as well, though her role in the investigation remained controversial within the family. Some relatives accused her of vindictiveness, arguing she could have simply destroyed the documents rather than turning them over to authorities. Others defended her decision, pointing out that she'd been lied to throughout their marriage and had every right to expose the truth. The family fracture never healed. Shanice moved to Kansas City within a year of the trial, seeking distance from the judgment and gossip that followed her in St. Louis. Jerome Caldwell's girlfriend, who had provided his alibi for the night of the heist, recanted her testimony after his arrest, admitting under pressure that Jerome had asked her to lie. She claimed he'd actually left her apartment around midnight on March 14th, giving him plenty of time to participate in the operation. Her revised statement strengthened the prosecution's case but also resulted in perjury charges against her. She served 8 months in county jail. Trent Bishop's wife filed for divorce immediately after his arrest. She claimed she'd known nothing about his involvement, though financial records showed unexplained deposits into their joint accounts throughout 2010 and 2011. Prosecutors offered her immunity in exchange for testimony about household finances, which she accepted. Her cooperation helped establish the money laundering timeline, but also meant testifying against her husband in open court, an act that haunted her for years afterward. Kendrick Hayes had no family present at his trial. He'd been estranged from his relatives for over a decade. In prison, he proved to be the most cooperative of the 4 defendants, eventually providing investigators with details about the laundering network he'd arranged through his freight transport connections. His cooperation led to additional indictments against 3 men in Arizona and Nevada who had facilitated converting the stolen cash into untraceable assets. In exchange for this information, Kendrick's sentence was reduced by 4 years, though he remained deeply unpopular among the other inmates, viewed as a snitch. The psychological profiles developed during pre-sentencing evaluations revealed interesting patterns. None of the 4 men showed signs of sociopathy or career criminal mentality. They weren't driven by greed alone, but by a combination of financial desperation, opportunism, and a belief that they were taking money from a wealthy corporation that could absorb the loss. Darius, in particular, exhibited what psychologists described as moral compartmentalization, able to view himself as fundamentally honest while simultaneously planning and executing a multi-million-dollar theft. During one evaluation session, Darius explained his reasoning in stark terms. He'd worked for Riverview Grand for nearly a decade, watching wealthy gamblers lose and win fortunes in single nights while he earned barely enough to cover his family's medical bills. He'd seen the casino's quarterly profit reports posted in employee break rooms, numbers in the tens of millions. In his mind, taking $6.5 million wasn't stealing from people. It was taking from a system designed to extract wealth from others. The logic was self-serving and ultimately hollow, but it revealed how he'd justified his actions internally. The casino itself faced significant scrutiny after the convictions. Gaming regulators in Missouri launched an investigation into Riverview Grand's security practices, questioning how a custodial supervisor had been able to access vault codes and disable alarm systems. The investigation revealed systemic failures, inadequate oversight of maintenance staff credentials, lax enforcement of code rotation policies, and insufficient monitoring of employee access logs. Riverview Grand was fined $2.8 million by the Missouri Gaming Commission for security violations. The casino's director of security and 2 senior managers were terminated. The parent company that owned Riverview Grand implemented sweeping reforms across all of its properties, including mandatory psychological evaluations for employees with high-level access, real-time AI monitoring of security system interactions, and quarterly audits of physical security protocols. Insurance covered most of the casino's direct losses from the heist, but the reputational damage was harder to quantify. High-stakes gamblers questioned whether their winnings were secure. Competitors used the incident in marketing, positioning their own properties as more trustworthy. Revenue at Riverview Grand declined by approximately 18% in the year following the arrests, though it gradually recovered as the story faded from headlines. The FBI agents who worked the case described it as both frustrating and illuminating. Special Agent Patricia Moreno, who led the investigation from 2010 through the arrests in 2013, later gave interviews emphasizing how close Darius came to getting away completely. If not for the storage unit discovery, she acknowledged, the case likely would have remained unsolved indefinitely. The criminals had made almost no operational mistakes during the heist itself. Their downfall came entirely from Darius's failure to destroy evidence afterward. A reminder that even meticulously planned crimes often unravel through mundane oversights rather than investigative breakthroughs. Agent Moreno also noted that insider threats remain among the hardest to prevent and detect. Background checks can reveal criminal history, but they can't predict when a previously honest employee will decide to exploit their access. Financial stress monitoring helps, but people experiencing hardship don't always seek help through official channels. The best defense, she argued, remains multi-layered security that assumes any single individual might be compromised, requiring multiple authorizations and constant verification. The stolen money that was never recovered continues to fascinate true crime enthusiasts and amateur investigators. Online forums still debate where the missing $5 million might be hidden. Some theorize it was converted into cryptocurrency and remains accessible to the defendants after their release. Others believe it was lost through poor investment choices or seized by the laundering intermediaries. A few conspiracy theorists suggest additional conspirators were never identified and are living comfortably on their share somewhere abroad. The truth is likely more prosaic. Much of the money was probably spent gradually over the 3 years before arrests, converted into everyday expenses through prepaid cards and cash purchases that left no trail. Some was certainly lost to the 30% fees typically charged by money launderers. The rest may indeed sit in accounts that authorities never discovered, though accessing it after release would immediately trigger surveillance. Darius has given only 2 interviews since his incarceration, both to criminal justice researchers studying insider theft. In those conversations, he expressed regret primarily for the impact on his daughters, who grew up with an incarcerated father and the stigma of his crimes. He acknowledged that the temporary financial relief the money provided was vastly outweighed by the permanent consequences of his choices.